If you don't know what are the most important DORA requirements, then this video is for you. So in this video I'll show you 9 key things that you have to comply with in this EU cybersecurity regulation, and I'll also show you a couple of DORA documents that you can use for compliance. And after you watch this video, you'll have a much clearer idea on what your financial entity needs to comply with and what will be the scope of your compliance project. And I made this video for CISOs, Chief Technology Officers, Compliance Officers, and any other people that work on DORA and cybersecurity compliance. So the first thing you need to know about DORA is that it provides a very detailed requirements for so-called ICT Risk Management. And these requirements are specified in its Chapter 2, but also in this CDR 2024-1774. This is a regulatory technical standard that provides even more details about ICT risk management and is considered as a kind of an appendix to DORA. In any case, this ICT risk management goes from the governance part, where it defines what the top management needs to do and how it actually controls how the company manages their ICT risks, all the way to listing all the assets, doing the risk assessment, and then defining which security and business continuity measures it needs to implement, controlling how these measures are implemented and basically how they are measured and improved. And these measures include prevention, detection, protection, response and recovery. And on the screen now you can see also an example of a business continuity plan that covers some of these requirements. The second thing that is important about DORA is that there is also this simplified ICT risk management framework, which basically means that if your financial entity is a small entity, then it needs to apply, I would say, scaled down version of these ICT risk management framework that is described in Chapter 2. And in the link in the description below, you'll see what are these smaller financial entities. But in any case, in Article 16 of DORA, you will see that it specifies what are these easier to follow requirements. And they basically come down to the same requirements as for the other larger entities, but they're not as detailed, not as strict. Third most important thing is about incident and threat classification and reporting. So DORA in its Chapter 3, as well as CDR 2024-1772, they specify detailed rules on how to manage, how to classify, also how to report not only incidents but also major threats. And they're very similar to NIS2 Cybersecurity Directive. These major cybersecurity incidents need to be reported to authorities according to specified timing. And here on the screen you can see an example of this incident handling policy. The fourth most important thing is this digital operational resilience testing that is specified in DORA Chapter 4. Now, basically this testing means that it is not enough only to implement all of these cybersecurity and resilience measures. It is also important actually to test how they really work in realistic situations in production environments. And this testing program needs to include various assessments, tools, methodologies, and so on, including also this threat-led penetration testing, or TLPT, which needs to be performed every 3 years. And it needs to be done by authorized and qualified testers, whether in-house or as external companies. And the European Commission will publish a separate regular technical standards for the purpose of specifying the details of this TLPT. The fifth most important thing is about how the financial entities need to handle this third-party ICT risk. And ICT here stands for Information and Communication Technology. And basically, ICT providers are any companies that provide some kind of an IT or communication services towards financial entities. So this includes software developers, cloud providers, telecommunication providers, and so on. And these requirements are specified in DORA Chapter 5, as well as in this CDR 2024-1773. And basically, these requirements come down to, first of all, specifying exactly what the financial entity requires from a certain third-party service, then doing a very detailed analysis and due diligence on potential suppliers, and then signing very detailed security and other clauses in their agreements where they specify the expectations, security and other expectations from these suppliers. Financial entities also need to monitor very closely how these suppliers provide their services. And interestingly enough, DORA also requires each financial entity for each of their critical ICT suppliers to create this ICT service exit strategy, where basically they have to define how they're going to react if the contract with a particular critical supplier needs to be terminated, and what they will do if they actually cannot use their services anymore. And on the screen here you can also see an example of this ICT service exit strategy. The sixth thing you have to know about DORA is how it actually goes much further than other cybersecurity regulations when it comes to treatment of ICT suppliers, because of course there are high supply chain risks that need to be addressed, especially for the financial sector. And DORA basically requires, first of all the ICT service providers to comply with the security standards, for example ISO 27001, PCI DSS and so on. But actually it has a special treatment for these ICT suppliers that are designated as critical. And interestingly enough, it is not the financial entities who designate them as critical. European supervisory authorities are actually the one to define who is critical. And then these ESAs actually appoint the lead overseer. So this is a government body that oversees how these critical suppliers work. In other words, the supervision here is not only on the financial sector, it's also on the ICT sector, or to be more precise, on the critical ICT suppliers for financial sector. And these lead overseers have almost the same authority as the financial supervisors have over financial entities. So they can actually examine all the records of these critical ICT suppliers, they can perform audits and all the other things, and they can impose fines. And these ICT critical suppliers even have to pay the fee for these kind of supervision services. Seventh most important thing is about sharing information on cyber threats amongst the different financial entities. And this is specified in DORA's chapter 6. And this is a very short chapter, but it basically defines the baseline for exchanging cyber threat intelligence and what is the role of competent authorities and also IT service providers. The eighth most important thing is about who is actually enforcing DORA. And basically DORA says that EU member states, so local authorities in each EU country, must enforce DORA and these CDRs. So nothing really much changes there, but there are a couple of exceptions, and this is where directly EU authorities on the European level enforce DORA. And this is for credit institutions that are classified as significant. For them directly the ECB, the European Central Bank, is in charge. And the second exception are securitization repositories. For them directly in charge is ESMA, the European Securities and Market Authority. The ninth most important thing about DORA is about penalties. And DORA does not really define penalties for financial entities because it says that EU member states, so each country in European Union, has to define its own penalties for financial entities. So basically it accepts the existing level of penalties from legislation in each EU country. However, DORA does specify the penalty of up to 1% of worldwide revenue for critical ICT suppliers that are not compliant with DORA. And this penalty is enforced by this lead overseer that I mentioned earlier. And this lead overseer can even order a financial entity to stop using the services of this critical ICT service provider if it is not compliant with DORA, and that it needs to use someone else instead. And these were the 9 important things, so I hope this was helpful. And if you want to access these documents that I was showing, so these were documents from DORA Documentation Toolkit from Advisera. You can click the link in the description below, and you'll be able to sign up for a free trial where you'll be able to download the free demo of these documents. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and you can subscribe to this channel not to miss any of my new videos, and I publish videos every week. Thanks for watching.